Ladies and gentlemen, I am on the phone with the legendary Edgar Winter from the Edgar Winter Group. Sir, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Stephen. Are y'all ready to rock and roll?
Always, sir, always. Um,
Fantastic, because we're planning on doing a little of that.
all right, awesome. So, you've contributed to a lot of movie soundtracks, but one that really sticks out to a lot of people, particularly to Gen Xers and millennials, was Freeride and Dazed and Confused. Do you feel that do you feel like that exposed younger generations to your music?
Yeah, I love to see usages of the songs. Both Frankenstein and Freeride have been used on numerous occasions. I know Frankenstein was in Wayne's World, and I remember hearing lots of kids that had never heard the song before. The same thing holding true of Freeride. And, whoever would have thought that there would be a classic rock genre and that people would still have such interest in songs, recorded back then. And I guess, we're all tempted to feel like the era in which we came up was somehow special. But I really do believe there were two golden eras in music, the 40s and 50s for big band, jazz, and swing, and the 60s and 70s for rock and roll. The main reason being is just that there was so much freedom. The record companies just stayed out of the way. I mean, you could go in the studio with 2 or 3 songs and actually sit down and create an album in the studio. Come up with riffs and trade ideas back and forth. It became a lot more business oriented, where you'd have to record demos and get approval for things. So I think part of the magic of that era was just the immediacy of that experience, the real band experience, capturing a live moment. So I think Freeride was that. And interestingly, that song was recorded before the Edgar Winter Group was really finalized, and we kind of went in the studio and did 2 songs. We did Freeride, and we all had a real good time. And that was before Chuck, the drummer, had joined the group even. So it was sort of like a test, and a good one, as it turned out. So it's great that I still hear it on the radio and enjoy in playing it, singing it, and hearing it. So there you go.
All right, awesome. And it's always interesting to hear what legendary musicians such as yourself think of current music, especially when they are experienced in all genres. Are there any particular contemporary artists that you're a fan of?
Well, I listen a lot to old stuff. I have to admit, probably if I had to name one person as a musical influence, maybe Ray Charles. Of course, my brother Johnny, and I listen to like Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra and people like that. I love jazz and classical music, so I listen to all of the early jazz greats, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Miles, all those people. And I do listen to the contemporary music and keep up with what's going on. There's not that much R&B around anymore, which was kind of my favorite style. Bruno Mars, I think, is great. And I enjoy playing. The main thing about my musical taste is that I enjoy playing a wide variety of music. And when my brother Johnny and I, when we were kids, he was the one with the dream and the ambition. He read all the magazines and watched Bandstand, and he was Johnny Cool Daddy Winter with the shades and the guitar and the whole thing. And when we first started out playing ukuleles when I was 4 years old, singing Everly Brothers song, then Johnny graduated to guitar, and it became evident he was going to be the guitar player. So I said, well, I'll just play everything else. So I played bass for a while, and I switched to drums, and then electric pianos came out. My dad played guitar and banjo and had played alto sax in a swing band in his youth, and then I discovered the saxophone in my teens and got really interested in jazz. But, music is an ongoing, ever-evolving thing. And the blues, for example, I think is the granddaddy of all music. It evolved into ragtime and Dixieland, and people think of jazz and blues, particularly blues, as something that's old and already happened and over with, forgetting that it really continues to exert a profound influence over all the pop music that's around today. So, to me, it all goes back, to the blues, and which developed into rock and roll. So, there you go. We're going to play all of it for you.
Well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And with all the different genres that you dabble in, what's your writing process like? How does it differ from genre to genre?
I'm constantly writing, and I find that I get most of my ideas in that alpha state, either just when I'm dropping off to sleep or as I'm waking up. I've written a lot of songs in dreams as well. I like to meditate. I think that when you clear your mind, that you're open to, more open to ideas than if you're actually sitting and, actively trying to write a song. And I do keep, the thing about music, I feel like when I'm writing or when I'm performing, when I'm playing, it draws me out of myself, and it takes me out of myself and makes me feel like I'm part of something higher, something greater. All the little problems and irritations of every day just seem to fade into the background, and you're just totally immersed in that moment. And it's just really an indescribable experience. And I feel that that connection, it is a very spiritual in a sense, both when I'm writing and when I'm performing. And I feel the same way when I'm listening to a great artist like B.B. King or Ray Charles. And when you're performing and you feel like that moment exists, and that you're united in an interesting way. It's like a bridge experience. So I don't know how better to put it, but that's, and I do I do keep like if I get an idea for a song, say Innocent Lust, I'll just write that down. I have like a list of title song ideas, and a lot of times if I'm interested in writing, I'll look that over and see what catches my eye. So it's to me it's just really fun and interesting. I've done it all my life, and it's something that and I write a lot of poetry. I write short stories, and I think they're all related in that same way. And you got to practice if you want to be a musician. That's the other thing is, and being a multi-instrumentalist, there are always things that you can work on. So it's always something new to learn, and I always try to play every show like it was my first show or the last show, because you never know what fate holds in store. But try to keep try to keep that same openness and enthusiasm. And I really do love it every bit as much as I did when I first started out playing. There's something magical about it. So we're really looking forward to the show, and we'll be doing everything you'd expect to hear from Edgar Winter, all the way back to Tobacco Road, the traditional blues song that I popularized with my brother Johnny. It has a long, never-ending scream and lots of guitar, vocal, call and response, trade-off stuff. And then songs from White Trash, like Keep Playing That Rock and Roll. It's an autobiographical song to tell the story of how Johnny and I got started. And then, of course, from the Edgar Winter Group, our biggest hits, The Indestructible Monster, Frankenstein, and it is close to Halloween, and Freeride, that we've already mentioned. And also, I'll be doing some songs from our last CD, Rebel Road. Had some interesting people. Slash played on the title track, and another friend of mine, a fellow Texan, Clint Black, who's a great country artist, singer, and writer, and plays great harp. I wanted some country harp. I had this song called Power of Positive Drinking, and I thought that would be perfect for Clint. Then at the end of the show, I always like to dedicate a few songs to my brother Johnny, and he may have departed this physical plane, but his spirit and vision and his music will live on in my heart forever. So we always do like either Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo or Jumpin' Jack Flash or Highway 61, like some of the songs that he and I grew up playing together. So it's an interesting mix of a lot of different styles, and we love to stretch out and jam. So for all of you people who are musicians or just really enjoy music, it really is an excellent quality of musicianship. All the guys in the band, and perhaps I should mention them. On guitar, Doug Rappaport. On bass, Coco Powell, and on drums is Jason Carpenter. And they all sing, they all play, and I'm noted for having played with lots of great guitarists. And of course, my brother Johnny and Rick Derringer and Ronnie Montrose. And Doug is he's been with me now 15 years, longest of any guitar player, and he's really developed into a phenomenal player. So there you have it, the Edgar Winter Group, which is now the Edgar Winter Band.
And I look forward to that show. I had one last really quick question. I found this in an interview that you did a few years ago. When they asked you about things that you were hoping to accomplish, you mentioned that you were working on completing a Broadway musical version of Frankenstein. Were there any updates on that project?
I have all of the music written for that, and yes, it's still very much in my mind and something that I want to do. I'm just looking for someone to collaborate with. I have all the music and the entire plot, but I feel like eventually I'll find some way of. I envisioned it as a Broadway musical, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be. It could be a series of videos. It could be done in any number of different ways. But if it's going to be Broadway, then I think it would be better to collaborate with somebody that is familiar with that, conversant with that style, and has done musicals. So I am capable of writing the dialogue, and if a number of more years go by without anything happening, I will find a way of actually presenting that in some fashion. And I'd mentioned also, I have a book of poetry called The Songs That Never Were, that some of them started out as lyrics that never turned into songs. And my wife, Monique, and I have been married for 39 years now. Not bad for rock and rollers. And when I'm out on the road a lot, I love to write poetry to her, and I I realized that I had well over 100 of these, and she said, we should really, this is something that would be a gift to the world, and something that that you should really find some way into. So I'm hoping to get that published at some point. I've got a lot of short stories that I've written that occur in this mythical realm called the Shadowlands, that are kind of interesting. But I loved all those, the Hobbit books, Fellowship of the Ring, and the Narnia Chronicles. My mother used to read those to me as a child, and I enjoy writing that kind of stuff. So, I'm always doing something. But currently, the next thing I've decided to do a Johnny Winter tribute album. Finally, I wasn't going to do it, but it seems like the right time to do that. And so I called some of my friends, Joe Walsh, of course, James Gang, and the Eagles, Billy Gibbons, a fellow Texan, ZZ Top. Joe Bonamassa, I've played some shows with. Kenny Wayne Shepherd, I know really well, and that's a good start. So I'll ask Slash I haven't talked to him about that yet, but that's a good start right there. So you can look for that sometime next year. I'm just getting started on it.
So you played at Woodstock '69 with the Johnny Winter Band. What can you tell me about that experience?
Woodstock changed my life unalterably and without question. It was one of those defining moments. I always think of my career as starting at Woodstock, and when I was a kid, like I was saying, I never dreamed of being famous. I just loved music in and of itself. I loved the beauty of harmony and rhythm. And as I said, I was more interested in jazz and classical than rock and pop music. And Johnny had invited me to New York to play on his first couple of albums, and he invited me to come on and play with his band. And nobody at that time really knew that he had a brother, so he'd play the first half of the set with his blues trio, and now I'm going to bring on my little brother Edgar. And then we did a very primitive version of Frankenstein. I actually wrote the riff to that song during that time. And we called it the double drum song because we had two sets of drums on stage, and I'd play dual drum solo with Johnny's drummer, and I played Hammond B3 and alto sax. So it was just sort of a showcase instrumental, and that's another story. But when I played Woodstock, the whole thing was set against the social backdrop of civil rights and the peace movement, and I got to experience it from both sides. Since nobody really knew who I was, I just kind of walked out in the audience and hung out in people's tents and trailers, and got to hear a lot of the great music, from the audience standpoint. And then there was really no organization to it at all. I remember also going back, hanging out, and there was a section where a lot of people that taken a lot of drugs and were insecure, high, and trying to talk to those people and reassure them and make them comfortable and feel better that it was all part of an experience. And I was just dead asleep in a press trailer, and somebody shook me awake and said, "Okay." They were just looking around for anybody that was capable of playing and going on. So all of a sudden we were there, and I looked out over this endless sea of humanity, and it was just like one of those moments, transfiguring moment, and just seeing all of those people united in that unique way made me realize that whereas as a kid, music has always been my own personal private escape world, and it was very internalized. But playing Woodstock changed my whole idea about music, and I realized that it actually has the power to bring people together in that unique way. And so from that point, I said, "Oh, maybe I'll try writing some songs and see if I have, something to say." So that was the beginning for me. And then Johnny's manager introduced me to Clive Davis, who was the president of CBS at that time, and I was totally unprepared. I thought we would just sit down and have a conversation, and he said, "Well, let me hear you play something." And so he called up all the A&R guys, and we went in a conference room, and there was a piano in the corner. So I played some blues. I played Tobacco Road, which I was starting to do with Johnny's band, and then I played some of my jazz and classical music that I was working on for the first album. And I told Clive, I said, "Well, I want to do this album that is a combination of jazz, blues, rock, and classical, and it's not going to have any commercial potential at all, and it's just sort of an experimental style of music." And he was totally. He said, "As long as you're okay with that," he said, I'm fine with it," and offered me a deal. And as I say, the rest is history.
With leaning up to the Frankenstein bash coming up on the 28th, a lot of people consider Frankenstein to be a Halloween song just based off the title. Do you find that kind of strange given that it's an instrumental, or is it something you embrace and just have fun with?
No, when the whole thing just actually came out of when synthesizers, with the advent of the synthesizer, that's what gave me the idea of putting a strap on the keyboard. I happen to be the first person to do that, and that's a simple and obvious idea that you would think someone would have thought of. But prior to synthesizers, I remember there was an old keyboard called a Univox. It was like a full-size keyboard, and that thing weighed 75 pounds. And after I did it with the synthesizer, I remember like using the M&M. That was that was an endeavor. But when I saw the synthesizer, this particular synth, there were Moogs, and the ARP 2600 had a remote keyboard. And I said, "Wow, it looks like you could just put a strap on this." And then I was trying to think of a song that would showcase the synthesizer. So I said, "I'll bet that old double drum song that we used to play, I bet that riff would sound great with this subsonic synth bottom." So we worked up a version of it and started playing it live. And the first time I walked on stage with that keyboard, it was just like one of those real rock and roll moments. And I said, "Well, I think we're on to something here." But we never thought about recording the song because it was like 15 or 20 minutes long. Every time I would create a new sound, we'd add another section to the song. And when we got toward the end of the project, I was talking to Rick about it, and he said, well, maybe we could figure out, we used to come in, like the cardinal rule when you were recording back in those days is tape is always rolling, because a lot of times you'd be sitting around just jamming and coming up with riffs and so forth, and you'd want to have those ideas accessible on tape. So we just happened to have like 2 or 3 versions. A lot of times we'd come in and set up and warm up playing that song just because it was so much fun. And he said, maybe we could edit that into something usable. So back in those days, the only way to edit a song was to physically cut the master tape. It's like cutting a diamond. If you made a mistake, the whole thing was gone. And so we were sitting around, and we had it lying all over the control room, draped over the backs of chairs and on the couch and on the console, and we were trying to figure out how to put it back together. And Chuck, the drummer, mumbled the immortal words, wow, man, it's like Frankenstein, drawing the analogy of an arm here and a leg there and, putting the thing together. And as soon as I heard it, I said, wow, Frankenstein, I think that's it. It even kind of sounds like it has that lumbering monster kind of vibe. So at first I didn't want to use it. I didn't like the association with the Frankenstein monster. I liked the Mary Shelley book. I thought the book was a great book, but I thought, I thought the vampires were Dracula was cool, but Frankenstein and the Mummy were kind of slow. They weren't that great in terms of the monster. But I envisioned myself as sort of the mad scientist, crazy doctor, and the song itself as the monster, the Frankenstein, the monster creation. So in that sense, and since I really did love the book, I thought, well, it's Frankenstein. And so from that moment, the monster was born, and it's still stalking the earth today. So there you have the story of Frankenstein.
That's awesome. You guys could all catch Edgar Winter at the Lincoln Theater on the 28th, where he is playing the Frankenstein Bash with Morrison Hotel, the Doors tribute band, where there will also be a costume contest going on.
Yeah, that's good. I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah.
And before we go, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all of my fans, all of you who followed my career as well as that of my brother Johnny's throughout all of these years. It's really meant the world to us to be able to do what we most love and see you all out there rocking and having a great time. So, all right, St. Louis, get ready to rock and roll.
Sir, I just want to thank you. It's been an honor talking to you. I've been a fan of yours for a long time. And
well, thank you, Stephen. Are you coming out to the show yourself?
As a matter of fact, I am, sir. Yes, I wouldn't miss it.
Well, be sure and stop by and say hello. And
all right,
I'll look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah, that would be awesome. It'd be an honor. Actually, I have They Only Come Out at Night on vinyl, and unfortunately, my record player...
maybe you can introduce us.
Oh. That'd be great. Well, thank you so much, sir. It's been an honor, and thank you for being on the show.
You're more than welcome, and I enjoyed speaking with you. And well, I played for a while with Michael McDonald, who I believe is from that St. Louis, a gentleman who really represents the St. Louis blues in a great way. I really loved his music and enjoyed playing with him. So I'll probably be thinking of him, when we're up there playing. So we're looking forward to it and ready to rock. So we'll see you there.
All right, sounds great, sir. Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.